Chapter 7. I was thinking of the funeral. The funeral. The one with presidents and ministers and secretaries of this or that, representing these or those, all decked out and solemn in black and respect. It was the biggest funeral ever, somebody had said. Everyone who was anyone, everywhere that was anywhere, had somebody, in attendance. Nobody wanted to miss the funeral. It was Kent's funeral. Like most people, I had watched it. It had been carried on the Fleet Beam, no less, and perhaps had the largest audience for any event in history. Such a man. Such a hero. Everybody's hero. I had felt pretty much the same way. I hadn't known any better. What a man. Funny, the things you think about when you're tired and scared and only have a second or two to rest. Which was all I had. Half stimuls and half painters. I had managed to get Holly and me pretty much fixed up. Medigrips and medipacks everywhere over the cuts and contusions and abrasions. There was a disquieting and possibly crucial amount of blood over us, but I figured we would live until they killed us. Lia called. I was too numb to think not to answer. She hated me, of course, and she blamed me for Holly still being there to begin with, maybe for him ever being there, and I was a liar, too, for not calling her back like I had said I would. True, all of it true. All of it and more. I smoked and listened in silence, staring not at her, but at the view of Borgland's console which he had so generously and sadistically continued to provide. We were really screwed. They had the whole riverfront laid out, staked out. They were ready for us. They were waiting for us. They had us. Shit. Something in Lia's tone had changed, I realized distantly. I looked up to see the same tears and the same aching pain. But something else had been added. Resignation. Acceptance. Whatever we wanted to do... Huh? Should have realized you would never give in to them. And Holly... I guess I knew all along. From that first moment when we got here to the valley, and he wasn't with us. He's just too good a man. She paused, whimpered, pulled herself together. She smiled weakly at me. And you too, Jack. You're both too good. I stared. Then I mumbled something back about, well, 'tweren't nothing. But I was thinking what I had thought long ago. How long ago? A month? When she had first accepted me along with all the rest of the Jack Crow smoke. You're a fool, Lia. Still a fool to trust me. It made no difference that now, when it wasn't going to help, when it was far too late for that she could trust me. It made no difference that I would never leave him now. It made no difference that I was about to die with him and for him. She was still a fool. So were we all. I was about to key off when she said no. There was someone else who wanted to talk to me. Karen. Dry-eyed and stone-faced. And goodbye, Jack. But too dry-eyed. Too stone-faced. It was on her, too. And because of that, I guess, as much as anything else, it sank upon me at last. It was over. We were dead. Goodbye, Jack, she said, and I saw the tears start coming at last. I nodded, feeling my eyes heating up, and leaned forward to key her off. Her face became alarmed suddenly, and she asked one last thing. She asked me to tell her that I wasn't doing this for her in any way. I said I wasn't, straight-faced and not lying much. Then I keyed off. Borglin began to laugh. I looked up, startled, then furious. He was back at the console. He had been listening in. "A peeping Tom now?" I asked him, snarled at him. He continued to laugh. It was a deep, powerful laugh, like the rest of him. It unnerved me, but I lashed out as if it didn't, about how he might as well listen in to me while he could and then in on others later because he sure as hell wouldn't have anybody of his own from now on. Not unless you count the daughter of somebody he was beating to death in another room. "She'll do it, Borglin." I was really rolling now. "She'll do it to keep Papa alive, but she'll hate you. She'll want to throw up with those fat pig hands and that fat pig body." He cut me off with his raging. I had hit something. "Don't give this to me, pig. Give it to her. But don't expect it to keep her from vomiting into those blue eyes. You're dead and gray and laid open, and she'll see it." He was very quiet. "Is it worth it?" I asked him, and smiled ugly through dry, caked lips. "Is it worth it what you've done to be what you're gonna have to be for the rest of your life?" He was still quiet, and something else. I remembered the look he had given me that last moment in the ship when he had laughed with such bitterness about Banshee. I had thought Banshee was destroyed, and he had laughed in that way that looked like it hurt. But not now. No help from that now, god damn it. "And don't start on that damned war, Borglin. A lot of people came through that war." He was excited again, and angry. "You don't know anything about it, Crow!" he roared. You damned adolescent! You don't know anything about what it was like, what it meant, how—" His voice trailed off. "I know one thing, Borglin. I know it when I see it. And it's you." His eyes went wide, confused, vulnerable. "You're the damned war, Borglin. You and your punks are now. You see any other ants around here?" He was quiet for a beat or two. Then he leaned forward to the monitor and spoke in a dead voice. Bright red, dead. "You're gone, Crow. Gone. I don't care if you try to give up now or not. Either way, I'm gonna see you stretched and bleeding." And then I was standing up from my stool and yelling at him, and shaking my fist at the screen and saying there wasn't much chance of that when he was in orbit and safe and hiding and still running away from that fighting. Borglin screaming back that, "By God, he ought to come down there and show me just what the hell fighting really was." And I shouted louder, shouted over his fury and outrage with fury and outrage of my own, and more, with the fear the sight of him gave me. "You come down here, pig, and I'll cut them off and bounce them down the bridge." God damn it, he was coming right now. And he yelled at somebody to take her down, and then he whirled back to glare at me, and together, against each other, we reached up and keyed off. Men are so cute. I woke Holly. Borglin was sure to lighten a bit of the way down, and it was never going to be a case of dueling pistols anyway. I was going to have to get to him on my own. But he would be there. He would be on the planet and in range of some kind of chance, some kind of scheme. I laughed. The plan had raised its throbbing head at last. Ollie refused unless he could play too. He looked at me with those bloodshot, darting eyes and refused. He was pale and shaking and hurt. But still he wouldn't. "You're gonna have to have some support fire, Jack. You haven't got a chance without it." "Damn it, Holly! I haven't a chance anyway! Stay out of it, Just show me how to blow what's left of the outer room and... I got a bad thought. What about after that? Will I be able to get the door open once I've blown the bastards in front of it? He smiled weakly. The door will spring, he assured me. I'll do it for you. I stared at him. No need. Just tell me how. No. Damn. So cute. It took a lot more painters to get him going again. That and stimules. On a second thought, I took a bunch myself. Why hold back now? I loaded up on other things, too. On blaze pistols clipped on everywhere, and a rifle with extra charges and a row or two of concussion grenades. Not enough to get me across the river to the Coyote. There weren't enough in the universe to do that alone. But maybe enough for my little plan. Maybe enough to get one of the commandos wearing the open-air armor. Anybody could wear open-air. It wasn't like Felix's specially built black suit. And once I had that on, and with perhaps a break or two... And then we were at the door. Me loaded down with goodies and Holly equally burdened with 2 blaze rifles and the metagrips piled around his leg and other places, making him walk bow-legged behind. I didn't want to waste any time on the off chance that Borglin would tell them I was coming out. I didn't think he would think of it. But still, I knew the people outside would never expect it. I stood crouched before the door and nodded to Holly by the panel. He keyed the blast. It shook the floor and the door. It blew, according to Holly, the outer room, floors and ceiling, and gash and commandos down the hill toward or in the river. It was very loud. Now spring the door, I urged him. I didn't want to wait an instant for them to recover. Holly nodded. He keyed the switch for open. That's all it took. I snarled at him as I raced forward. He laughed and stumbled along behind. The plan was for me to rush out ahead to find cover. Then I would support Holly's exit against any resistance that might be left from the first blast. Holly could thereafter support my charge down the hill over the ridge. We never had a prayer. The blast had done its job well enough. There was no sign of the front chamber except for the huge chunks of masonry scattered about. As I leaped forward to the first boulder-sized one, however, I knew it was over. They were waiting at the ridge, safe and secure, and already firing, already filling the air with the arcing grenades. I spun around to yell at Holly to stop. Stay where you are! Holly, I'm coming back in! But then, it was too late. The first blasts hit, and we both went down. I saw him slammed against a jagged cornice and lay stunned. I tried crawling toward him, but then the air was full of blue beams and dust from the blasts. I felt a surge of heat along my thigh and jerked it out of the open. I couldn't get across the open space to him. I was cut off, but he was exposed. He was open to their fire and the blasts, without any protection at all but a difficult angle up from the ridge. The ridges. The other side opened up about then, and then from 2 sides, the air was filled with beams and grenades and dust and slamming, rocking noise. I tried crawling back to him, curled up around myself to ward off the dust and rock that rattled against the surrounding rubble. But it was no good. No way to get back without being struck by the flying shards. No way to stay. No way to do anything. So I crawled and stumbled forward, and things crashed into me, cutting and tearing and crushing, and I yelled to Holly that I was sorry. Sorry, so sorry that I wasn't going to make it to help him. I was dying and sorry, and Holly, can you hear me? Suddenly, moving quickly, sliding roughly across the broken stones. Holly? But Holly was there beside me, sliding along parallel, and... What the hell? I strained to lift my head to see who had us by our collars, but then he no longer did. We were inside the second room once more, and he had dropped us, flopping on the floor and turned to reseal the door. It was Lewis. It was drunk. He was sober. I remembered the hatch. He didn't bother to take us all the way back to the control room table. He left us lying where we were and used the medical supplies stacked against the wall. "Lewis?" asked Holly suddenly. I turned, surprised and delighted to see he was still alive. "Holly, you made it!" He grinned, winced from the pain. "Why not? You did," he asked. Then we both laughed. Lewis did not. He didn't speak at all, in fact. He tended to us in grim silence, darting back and forth from body to body with grips and packs and an air of urgency. We weren't much help. Too tired and too hurt, and, come to think of it, too amazed at being alive. When it was over and we were going to live for another short while, he sat us up against the wall and gave us some water. Then he hauled over a chair and sat down and lit a cigarette and looked at us with the same grim expression of a parent furious with naughty children, and asked, why. Holly tried to tell him about Borglin using mortars on the city folk again and again, and about how horrible that was and what it meant, about how Borglin would be so hated now that he would have to be even more brutal later on, and how, no, we didn't think we could beat him exactly, but slowing him down would surely mean something. He interrupted once. In a cold tone, he nodded at me. "All this for you two?" I nodded, feeling strangely embarrassed. Holly seemed embarrassed too. He went on, really wanting Lewis to understand. "It has to be done, Lewis." Lewis sighed. "It always does, Holly. That's no reason to do it." "But all those people..." "What about them?" Holly frowned, stuck. He turned to me, but I couldn't think either. He turned back to Lewis. "Lewis, there just isn't anyone else. Can't you see that?" He stood up, walked a couple of steps. He puffed a puff. He looked down at us. "Shouldn't that tell you something?" Holly faced him. "I just didn't see any way out, Lewis. I still don't." Lewis frowned. "Don't you?" "I don't," replied Holly in an odd tone. I looked at him. Tears were starting from his eyes. I shook my head. What the hell was going on? And then Lewis was there, right in front of us and crouched down and peering at us with eyes I didn't know he possessed. And he said, "You can't. Neither of you. You don't see any way out." We shook our heads, and then Holly said in a calm, clear voice, "There isn't one." Lewis dropped his face into his hands. He rubbed it hard. But then, when he lifted it back up, the grimness had gone. It was replaced with... what? Reckless abandon? He smiled. "I was afraid you'd say that." Then he stood up and stripped off his jumpsuit. He was naked underneath. I heard a groan behind me. I looked and saw that Holly was openly crying now. He must have known then. But I didn't, until Lewis walked naked to the far corner of the room and did something that only one human creature in all the universe could do. He touched his open palm to that of a black suit, and it opened. Felix.